Hello and welcome back to the episode. This is the StackStorm Technical Deep Dive. I'm Rick Kaufman, Global TME over here at HPE Aruba Networking. Now, in the last episode, we talked about packs. We looked at them, we explored them, we figured out everything about them. But we want to authenticate them to StackStorm, and that's kind of a trick. So StackStorm has a directory called configs. And there's a YAML file that we need to put our credentials in and stash it in the configs directory. And once we do that, we need to reload the StackStorm server. So we're going to figure out how to do that all in this episode. So let's get started.
Now, we talked about all the little, the jelly bean files, the stuff that kind of sticks the pack together. But we really want to get down. The first thing I always think of is actions. So what kind of actions do I want in my pack? Well, in my action pack, that's kind of cool, I have these actions. Now, you'll see that an action has a YAML file and a Python file. So, like we said before, the YAML file kind of introduces or sets up what's going to happen next, what type of runner type. That is a great point and a perfect time to go out and look at this again. If we go out and look at StackStorm and you look in the docs, taking you through step by step, but we could say RUNNERTYPE. If we spell it right, you must spell everything correctly. Action runners, right? So there are runner parameters. I thought there were some runner types in here. Maybe that's under just straight up actions. Let me take you over there real quick. Actions, and we come down here choosing an action runners. So here they are. When we're sitting here in this introductory action YAML file, we're setting it up and we're specifying a runner type. And my runner type is a Python script in this particular action. But action runners, actually, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. You can run a command or some sort of script. Or you can do it remote on a remote machine, a command or a script on a remote machine. You can run a Python script. Or do this HTTP request. Or any of these others, right? There's 12 of them here, and you see down here, Orchestra. That's the workflow that we talked about earlier. So I mainly just do the Python scripts in Orchestra, but you can take your pick here and do whatever you need to do in your pack. But in my pack, this get people action is set up by simply building a little YAML file like this. You've got to be very sure that you specify the pack that this action belongs to, or it'll get all messed up and you wonder what happened. Right, so entry point, get people pie. So where's that? Right here, get people pie. So I'm not doing any authentication here, and I should probably show you something else that has it in there, but I'm just going to show you how this works right now. We'll dive into this a little bit deeper here in just a second. So this is the Python script. So I've got URL lib 3 requests JSON. So boy, here's requests in JSON. I got utility, this lib actions. So requests, I think, if I'm not wrong, I need to put requests up here. So I make that part of my environment when it gets built. So getting back to get people. So we go down here and we say, we're going to go to utility and run a get URLs. And we're going to find a file there called get URLs, and we're going to import the get URLs function out of that. Okay, so we're going to do that. So I can show you that. It's up here. And I try to do stuff like this to make these little subroutines to keep my code a little cleaner. But this is kind of kooky because what I'm doing is I'm sending it a query, and that query goes off and does a request get of the query. So I'm going to show you what that query looks like here in my get people. So before we do that, we have to come up with a query, right? And so we say we're going to run, right? We're going to get list of URLs. So this is a list of URLs of the people. And this is a Python list data type. Right, so we're going to build a list of URLs. So URL equals the base URL. So this is self base URL. So where did that come from? And where did we see base URL before? We saw it down here in the example file, right? Base URL. That's when we saw that. So how in the world does this script know that it's got this thing called base URL? Well, it's because we're building a Python class here called people, and we're building on the swappy base action. And you can see up here from lib actions, we're importing the swappy base action. So if we go up and look in lib, boom, we can see actions up here, and this is the file that gets imported when we're building that class called people. And in here is a class called swappy base action that's also built on action that we're importing from st2 common. So we're going to st2 common, getting action, and starting this up, and we're calling it swappy base action, and we're just saying that we have a couple of things here, self and config, and we're saying we're initializing this config equals config. So what that's doing is going out to that file down here that we had, the example file. We copy that to the st2 configs directory in our server, and we change it. We get rid of the example part, and that's where that file lives. So it goes out and looks in configs for the file that matches the pack that's running, and it says, okay, I find a variable in there called base URL. So I will say that base URL is going to equal get this base URL. So it just goes out to the config file down here. So that get base URL is here, get base URL self. Base URL is going to equal what it finds in the config file called base URL. So that base URL I showed you earlier, it's going to get that, and it's going to put it right here in base URL. And because this class is being imported here, swappy base action, I'm putting it right here in this class. So everything that's in that class, I can reuse in this one. So, but I have to reference it by the word self base URL. So I'm setting up the URL to be self base URL / people. Now, if I wanted planets, I just put planets here. But I'm building a people class, not a planets class. So we just simply go down and we say URLs get URLs. And we're passing this URL of people. And that's what's happening when we go and get URLs. So I split that code out. I pass it the URL of people, and it gets, that's the query, and it goes out there and it gets every single one of the 82 people that's in there. And we get a response back from the server, and we load that as JSON data. And now for every resource in JSON data results, we are going to take our URLs up here, URLs, it's empty, and we're going to append the resource URL that we find. So this just loops through that whole list of URLs we get back and builds a Python list. And when it finds out that it looks for this thing called next, and if it's there in the string, it's going to get the next URL. But if not, it'll return false. This will quit and give up the ghost, and it's going to return the URLs back to people. So now people gets URLs get URLs, the URL baseline, base URL people, right? That gives us a whole list of every person's URL. And now we just have to chunk through them. So we have to iterate through them. And we're saying for every item in URLs, which is a list of people URLs, we are going to go out and we're going to say response. And we're going to use request to go get that URL of that person. And when we get that person, we're going to find out, we're going to JSON load that information we got back, and we're going to find out the name of the person, height, mass, hair color, skin color, eye color, birth year, gender, homeworld, films, species, vehicles, starships. And we are going to append that list of information into an empty list. And as we iterate through, we'll just add another list to the list of lists. This is getting crazy, but this is how it's done. So when we're done running this action, it's a singular thing, and we're just going to turn a list of URLs, and that list of URLs is actually a list of lists. So it's not really URLs, right? So they're lists of people, right? So that's what we're going to call it. We're going to call it list of people. So it's a list of people up here. We already have a URL we call base people. We go out and we get this URLs. That's a list of URLs. And then we process through it. We get the personal information out of every single person in the database. And we append that to list of people. And then when we're done, we got to remember to turn list of P-O-P-L-E, people. Okay? All right. So it'll run the other way. It doesn't matter. It could be called list of bananas. It doesn't matter. As long as it matches the very first thing that we initialize up at top as an empty list, and we just stay the same as we go through it, you can call it anything you want. So there you go. All right. So that's what's going on with this particular action. Okay. We're going to cover this a little bit more. We're going to look into some other actions, and we'll just go over them briefly, and I will show you what else is coming up. So stay tuned and join us in the next chapter.